I didn't choose my life. I allowed fear to choose it for me. That's the confession I avoided for years, because once you say it out loud, there's nowhere left to hide. You can't blame bad luck. You can't blame other people. You can't even blame time. You have to face the quiet truth that nothing dramatic stopped you, you simply stepped aside. From the outside, my life looked reasonable. Safe. Predictable. The kind of life people describe with approving nods. I followed the correct sequence of decisions, the ones that were supposed to protect me from regret. And somehow, I still ended up full of it. Fear didn't arrive loudly. It didn't announce itself as fear. It came disguised as caution, responsibility, maturity. It told me I was being smart. That I was thinking ahead. That I was avoiding unnecessary risks. Every time I hesitated, fear rewarded me with relief. Relief from uncertainty. Relief from judgment. Relief from the possibility of failing publicly. That relief became addictive. I learned to associate safety with goodness, and risk with shame. So when opportunities appeared, the kind that demand courage before they offer clarity, I explained my way out of them. Not now. Not ready. Not practical. Later, when things are more stable. Later never came. I told myself that wanting more was selfish. That contentment was a discipline. That dreams were for people who could afford to lose everything. I convinced myself that my discomfort was proof that I was doing something right. I mistook tension for purpose. Over time, my world became smaller. Not physically, but internally. My thoughts narrowed. My ambitions softened until they stopped asking anything of me. I didn't fail at my dreams, I downgraded them until they fit inside fear. That's how fear works. It doesn't forbid you from wanting. It teaches you to want less. I stopped imagining futures that scared me. I stopped picturing myself in places where I might be judged, rejected, or exposed. I built a life where nothing extreme could happen, including joy. The scariest part is how normal it felt. Days passed quietly. I functioned well. I fulfilled obligations. I smiled at the right moments. No one worried about me. There was no obvious reason to worry. That was the trap. Because fear doesn't ruin your life all at once. It organizes it. I remember a specific evening when I realized something was wrong. I was sitting alone, doing nothing in particular, when a sudden thought appeared, uninvited and sharp. If nothing changes, this is it. Not someday. Not temporarily. This. The thought didn't scare me immediately. It settled in slowly, like cold. I started testing it against my life, against my routines, against my plans. And no matter how I rearranged things, the answer stayed the same. This was the life fear had built for me. And I had helped every step of the way. I noticed how often I avoided decisions that could alter my trajectory, how frequently I chose the option that would draw the least attention. How deeply I cared about not disappointing people whose opinions didn't actually define me. Fear taught me to confuse approval with belonging. At night, I replayed moments where I could have chosen differently. Not with regret at first, with analysis. I told myself I was being objective. Rational. But underneath that analysis was a quiet mourning. I wasn't sad about what I lost. I was sad about what I never tried. That sadness didn't explode. It lingered. It followed me into ordinary moments. It showed up while brushing my teeth, while waiting in line, while listening to conversations I no longer felt part of. I began to feel like a background character in my own life, present, but not central. Necessary, but replaceable. I did what was required of me, but nothing I did felt chosen. Fear had taken over the role of decision-maker so gradually that I didn't notice when my own voice went quiet. I realized something unsettling then: fear had never actually promised me happiness. It had only promised me survival. And survival, without meaning, starts to feel a lot like punishment. I wasn't depressed. That word didn't fit. I was operational. I was stable. I was intact. But I wasn't alive in the way I remembered being alive once, when choices felt risky and time felt full. I tried to ignore it. I tried to be grateful. I tried to convince myself that this was adulthood, that longing was immature, that acceptance was wisdom. But late at night, when no one was watching, a different truth surfaced. I wasn't afraid of failing. I was afraid of finding out who I could have been. And that fear was quietly costing me everything. Once I admitted that fear was making my decisions, I couldn't stop seeing it everywhere. It was woven into my habits, my conversations, even my silences. I noticed how often I paused before speaking, measuring my words not for honesty, but for safety. How frequently I chose invisibility over expression. Fear had trained me well. I had learned how to disappear without actually leaving. I was present, but filtered. Careful. Polite. Predictable. I avoided conflict not because I was peaceful, but because conflict might expose what I wanted, and wanting felt dangerous. The days grew heavier after that realization. Not because anything changed on the surface, but because I could no longer pretend I didn't know. Every familiar routine felt like consent. Every repeated choice felt like a quiet betrayal. My body began to react before my mind was ready to act. Sleep became unreliable. I would wake up in the middle of the night with a racing heart and no clear reason. Mornings felt like obligations I hadn't agreed to. I carried a constant, low-level tension, as if I were bracing for something that never arrived. People told me I looked fine. That I was doing well. I nodded and accepted their reassurance, even as something inside me slowly unraveled. I started counting time differently. Not by calendars or milestones, but by missed moments. The conversations I didn't start. The chances I declined without thinking. The versions of myself I edited out before anyone could see them. The worst realization came quietly, during an ordinary moment. I was listening to someone talk about a decision they had made, risky, imperfect, deeply personal. They weren't certain it would work out. They admitted they were scared. And yet, there was life in their voice. I felt a sudden, sharp envy. Not of their outcome, but of their courage to choose while uncertain. That envy shocked me. It revealed a truth I didn't want to face. Fear hadn't kept me safe. It had kept me stagnant. I began to understand that the cost of my caution wasn't visible failure, but invisible loss. Loss of momentum. Loss of identity. Loss of time that would never announce its absence until it was gone. The moral dilemma stopped being abstract. It became brutally clear. I could continue letting fear guide me, preserving comfort and predictability, or I could disrupt everything I had built and risk becoming unfamiliar even to myself. Both options terrified me. Staying meant knowing exactly how my days would feel. Leaving meant stepping into a future without guarantees. One promised certainty without meaning. The other promised meaning without safety. For a long time, I told myself I wasn't ready. That I needed more clarity, more confidence, more proof that leaving was the right choice. But clarity never comes before action. It only comes after. I realized then that waiting for certainty was just another strategy fear used to keep control. The breaking point didn't arrive with drama. It arrived with exhaustion. A deep, bone-level tiredness that no amount of rest could fix. I was tired of managing myself. Tired of rehearsing explanations. Tired of shrinking my life to fit inside my fear. One night, I sat alone and imagined my future as it was unchanged. Not as punishment, but as continuation. I saw the same routines, the same careful decisions, the same restrained version of myself repeating endlessly. The image wasn't tragic. That's what made it unbearable. I understood then that fear doesn't just limit your choices. It slowly convinces you that limitation is your identity. That you are the kind of person who doesn't risk, doesn't leap, doesn't disrupt. I didn't want to become that person permanently. The thought of leaving still scared me. The thought of being misunderstood, judged, or failing publicly tightened my chest. But for the first time, another fear rose to meet it. The fear of reaching the end of my life and realizing I had never truly participated in it. That fear was sharper, clearer, more honest. I started imagining disappearance again. Not escape for its own sake, but absence from the version of myself fear had constructed. The idea of stepping away from expectations, roles, and explanations felt dangerous and necessary. I didn't make a plan yet. I didn't announce anything. But internally, something shifted. A quiet refusal took root. Fear could no longer decide alone. And once that boundary existed, even imperfectly, there was no going back to innocence. Because I now knew the truth, I wasn't trapped by circumstance. I was trapped by hesitation. And hesitation had already taken enough from me. I didn't defeat fear. I didn't suddenly become brave. That's the lie people like to tell after the fact. What actually happened was quieter and less heroic. I got tired of negotiating with it. Fear had been asking the same question for years: what if this goes wrong? And I finally answered with a different one: what if this is all there is? That question changed everything. I didn't disappear overnight. I didn't vanish in a dramatic way that would give people a story to tell. I began withdrawing in small, deliberate steps. I stopped volunteering for things I didn't believe in. I stopped explaining myself beyond necessity. I let conversations end without trying to be understood. I chose absence where I used to choose accommodation. At first, it felt wrong. Almost immoral. I had built my identity around being reasonable, dependable, agreeable. Letting go of that felt like betraying a contract I had signed without reading. People noticed. Of course they did. Some asked questions. Some offered advice. Some tried to pull me back into familiar patterns by reminding me who I was supposed to be. I listened politely and said very little. Explaining would have turned my decision into a debate, and fear thrives on debate. So I let silence do the work. The moment I truly left wasn't marked by a goodbye. It was marked by a feeling I hadn't experienced in years: responsibility. Not the kind that weighs you down, but the kind that wakes you up. The realization that whatever came next would be mine, without excuses. That realization was terrifying. The first days after leaving were disorienting. Fear didn't disappear, it followed me, louder than ever. Without the structure it had built, it scrambled for control. Every doubt surfaced at once. Every worst-case scenario demanded attention. I questioned everything. My timing. My judgment. My worth. There were nights when regret nearly convinced me to return, to apologize, to re-enter the life I knew how to survive. But something stopped me. Even at my most uncertain, I felt more present than I ever had while staying. My fear was sharp, but it was honest. It belonged to the moment, not to years of avoidance. I was scared, but I was there. That mattered. Starting over wasn't empowering. It was humiliating. I was slow again. Unsure. I made mistakes that couldn't be disguised as strategy. I had to admit I didn't know what I was doing. And yet, for the first time, my actions felt intentional. Even the wrong ones. I learned something important in that phase: fear doesn't disappear when you choose yourself. It changes roles. It stops being your master and becomes information. A signal, not a command. I still felt it when I made decisions. But I no longer let it decide whether I was allowed to make them. Some things I lost permanently. Certain relationships never recovered. Some people never forgave my refusal to remain predictable. I carry the weight of that. Choosing yourself doesn't absolve you from consequences, it simply makes them conscious. But I also gained something I didn't expect. Time slowed down. Days felt longer, heavier, more textured. Moments stayed with me. Even difficult ones. I could feel myself forming opinions again, wanting things again, reacting without editing myself first. I wasn't happier in the way people imagine happiness. There was no constant lightness, no permanent peace. But there was alignment. A quiet sense that my life was finally being lived from the inside. Sometimes I think about the version of me who let fear decide for so long. I don't hate them. I understand them. Fear kept me safe when I didn't believe I could survive exposure. But safety came at a price I almost paid in full. Here's the truth I wish someone had told me earlier: fear doesn't ruin your life by stopping you. It ruins your life by convincing you to stop yourself. You don't notice at first. You still move, still function, still progress in ways that look acceptable. But gradually, you trade possibility for certainty, expression for approval, presence for protection. And one day, you realize your life has been carefully arranged around avoiding regret and you're still drowning in it. I don't know where my choices will ultimately lead. I no longer pretend to. That uncertainty used to terrify me. Now, it feels honest. If you're listening to this and something inside you feels tight, restless, exposed, I want to tell you to make a drastic change. I want to tell you to leave. I want to tell you to stay. I'll only ask you this: who is making your decisions right now? Because if fear is choosing for you, the cost won't be obvious. It won't be dramatic. It won't even feel painful at first. It will feel safe. And one day, you may wake up and realize that safety quietly replaced your life while you were busy convincing yourself that this was just how things are. I didn't choose my life for a long time. Now, even when I'm afraid, I do. And that choice, imperfect, uncertain, irreversible, is the first thing that has ever truly belonged to me.